I think the overall goal of a low-cost cremation brand is to offer basic services at a low cost that don't include, all of the additional things that you would see in a traditional package. Like they're not going to include that viewing just in case the family wants to do it. They're not going to include the extras really. So they're giving the family the option of having that minimal service, which is usually cost driven. And then the family is given the option to add on additional services as needed. I think that would be the goal.
Got it. The way I kind of view it, and this is a very generalization, but kind of just to provide a lot of cremations with very limited services for less than $1,500, something around there. I think that usually is what we kind of see as our most successful. So I think in your experience, you came from a very successful cremation brand at the time. And I think we should talk a little bit about your experience, what you guys did, what was the mission while you were there, and what families can kind of expect when they interacted with your company or brand.
Yeah. So the brand that I worked for, I would have to say they were probably like the early disruptors of the industry because they started in the Portland, Oregon area offering simple direct cremations for $495 like 15 years ago. So they came in extremely low, lower than everybody else. And that was just, a direct cremation. A lot of people wanted that and that's what we were able to provide. But the overall, I think goal of the company was that no matter what services somebody's asking us for, because we were still a full service funeral home. We weren't traditional, but we would still, be able to do burials and all the traditional services that somebody needed, was to treat every family that came through our door that we talked to on the phone just exactly the same. So whether they were a traditional family or somebody wanting just minimal services, that they still got the courtesy that everybody got and they got the professional services that everybody got. That's really what the brand was built on. It was making it feel like families were getting the traditional level of service, but they were purchasing a direct cremation basically.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is important. I wonder, in doing that many cremations a year, you guys must have had a pretty solid footing in the community. People knew about you. People knew about your service. Can you talk a little bit about what the perception of that brand was?
Yeah, I think over time, as it started, obviously it was a slow growth, but getting up to 5,000 cremations a year in those last few years that I was there, that was a lot of hard work in the community and building those relationships with hospice so that we would be the ones that, somebody would call if they just had a question, or if hospice needed a funeral home to call or just to really even do a removal for, that they would feel comfortable calling us because we'd built that relationship with them. And really, I think the success of the business ended up being because of our relationships with hospice, because there was so much time and effort put into those relationships and truly making it a relationship, right? Where it's like, this is a new hospice nurse maybe that's come on and they've never been to a funeral home or seen maybe what a crematory looks like. So we would bring them in and do a tour and explain to them. So it was more of a personal relationship so that we would know the hospice nurses by name when they called us. And it was that kind of a relationship.
Awesome. Yeah. And so you came from a very successful brand that put in a ton of work, kind of figured it out. It was running I'd say a well-oiled machine, a lot due to you because you were one of the managers there. But then since then, you've now moved into the client consulting role here at Parting Pro. And here what you do is you basically help onboard and train new funeral homes that are either starting a new brand or basically starting with Parting Pro, right? Some go from starting a completely new brand, never been out there. Some are an extension of a funeral home, and some are already operating like cremation societies that are doing thousands. So you kind of see the whole spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see a lot of things where we know that this is going to work well. We fit exactly with their business model. And then we also kind of see the ones where we know off the bat, there's a lot of red flags. There's a lot of things that we either have to change or attempt to try to change within how they operate or how they think so that they're going to be successful. And so I thought today what we can do is we'll just kind of go back and forth on some of these things of what are the immediate kind of red flags in saying that, okay, if you want to start a cremation brand, this is not going to work. And this is what we need to fix or what you need to understand before you're going to be successful. So I think what we'll do is we'll start a little bit more on the obvious ones, some of the big red flags, like no matter what you do, it's not going to work. And then go into some of the more nuanced ones that I think people are not always going to understand, or it's not going to be as obvious right away.
Sure.
You want to go first?
Yeah. So I think one of the more obvious ones we see, or where we'll have a customer kind of want to start out, is that they're just in the wrong demographic, or they don't have the surrounding demographic that's going to support the online arrangements. Not that nobody in their area wants to make online arrangements. So for example, like there's somebody in particular that wanted to do a cremation brand. They had a, successful funeral home and were wanting to get into the online business. But just wanting to get into the online business isn't necessarily enough, right? There has to be some evidence there that people are going to take to online. So that demographic, I think, is important, because if the community is either small and close knit and really used to coming into the funeral home, or maybe an elderly population that's not really used to doing things online, they're more used to that in-person thing, it might just not take off the way that people are expecting it to.
Yeah. I will say that there's a caveat to that. I think some of what we've seen, though, is that people will be quick to say that my people aren't going to use this. If you're from an area that has a population of like 200,000-300,000 people in your area that you're serving, it's going to work.
Yeah. Agreed. Mm-hmm.
Especially what you're saying. And I don't know if this is the customer you're thinking about, but there was one where they were like, well, half of my families don't have email addresses. And I think, when that's the case, that's where it starts to get to like, okay, I don't think maybe online is the thing it's going to save your business or help you grow.
Right. Yeah. And I agree with the size of the area you're in, right? If you're at a certain size of area, you're going to have that business just naturally because you're in a bigger area. You just have more diversity in that area, more age groups, more people in general. But yeah, when we're talking about maybe more rural areas or that kind of just hometown feel where there is still a pretty close-knit community, yeah, it might not be this. Or yeah, exactly, the email addresses. If people aren't using emails and things like that, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times what people forget also is that your goal is to get a lot of these and to do it for lower margin, right? So if you have a population of only 5,000 to 10,000 people around you and you're only doing 200 funerals a year is like busy for you.
Yeah.
Like this probably isn't it.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's like one of the hallmarks of being able to do the online direct cremations. You're doing it for less cost because you're cutting a lot of your overhead. So you're trying to offer it at a lower cost, which means you need to do a lot more to be able to make the same profits that you would. So yeah, exactly.